I know for certain that there's a lot of connection, comfort, courage, and joy waiting for you in our beloved community. I'd like to offer a special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the very first time this morning. If you're interested in learning more about who we are and what we do, just complete a guest card, which you'll find in the pew rack in front of you. Place it in the collection plate later in the service, and we'll make sure to get in touch. If you're watching remotely, we invite you to visit our website at uucleveland.org or just send us an email. As we prepare to enter into sacred time and space together, connecting with our deepest selves and with one another, please take a moment to set any of your electronic devices to worship mode. We welcome Eleanor as our chalice lighter this morning. Eleanor loves animals, and this is her second Sunday with us here at UUCC. Thanks for jumping in, Eleanor, and we're so happy to have you here with us. Please join me in reciting the words of our chalice lighting found on the yellow yard card in the pew rack in front of you. We cultivate trust with one another by celebrating differences, honoring boundaries, and offering compassion and care. We listen to each other deeply with curiosity and wonder. We speak for ourselves without need to defend ourselves or persuade each other. We create safe and brave space for healthy conflict, creativity, and fun. We reconcile through forgiving and making amends when we hurt one another.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Eleanor. My name is the Reverend Randy Partain. My pronouns are they, them, and I am delighted to be with you in worship today, whether you're here in person or joining us online. Martin Buber wrote that spirit is not in the I, but between I and you. In fact, Martin Buber would say, I and thou, as we behold one another. And so in that spirit of the sacred being created by our presence with one another, may we enter into worship today. We're going to sing together hymn number 323, Break Not the Circle, which is in the gray hymnal. And before we raise our voices together, I just invite you to take a moment and greet those around you, and with a wink, say, you complete the sacred in me this morning. Within this circle, we bring a lot of ourselves. We've been trying some new things with our Joys and Concerns bowl, not to try to make everyone happy, but to find out what will be the most meaningful way to engage in this practice with one another. So a lot of you have put stones in the bowl already as we were centering for worship, representing all of the things that you are either celebrating or concerned about that you bring into this space, into this circle of community. If you're joining us online, you can write down in the comments. I guess you have to type it. You can't write it unless you have one of those special little notebooks or something. But you can type into the comments any joys or concerns that you want the congregation to know about. And we have a book here for folks to write in before the service if there are things they want folks to know about. I don't usually see my name on the book, so it caught me off guard. But first, we have a stone of prayer and healing for Jan, who is still in the hospital due to complications from chemo. This is Peggy Lagodny's sister, Jan. And also a stone of care for Peggy's great niece, Aliana, who is recovering from surgery. And then a stone of appreciation for me, which is a weird thing. But really, it's not just me. But it says, appreciation for Randy Partain for their participation at the panel discussion right here yesterday following the performance of The God I Know with Debbie Plummer. There were a lot of people that went into making our space a welcoming space for that performance on Friday night and yesterday afternoon. We had about 50 people here, and most of them were not from our congregation, so it gave us a chance to connect with a larger community. So thank you to everyone who helped make The God I Know a special event and a successful event. What else do you want to acknowledge today? I invite you to come forward and place a stone in the water for any joys or concerns that you carry with you today as Karin plays. invite you into a moment of prayer or reflection or meditation. Spirit of love and life, we do not always know what we invite when we invite other people into our lives. Hopefully, we are able to remain curious about the unexpected things that we bring to one another, the opportunities to share in our burdens and in our joys, in our sorrows and in our celebrations. Maybe it is in that sharing that they become more sacred. And in that sharing as a community of love and trust and belonging, perhaps we come closer to allowing all of the moments of our lives to become sacred. If we can be that for one another, if we can be that connection that helps make every moment of life more sacred, what else could we ask for? Amen, and blessed be.
Good morning. My name is Jenny Papp, and I am the Director of Lifespan Faith Development for this congregation. My pronouns are she and they. It's great to see you all here today. I have a story this morning for you about a church not so much unlike our own, perhaps. They've had some adversity and some things, and they found a way to stay strong and loving, even when someone tried to take that away from them. Has anyone ever noticed rainbow flags in this congregation? Raise your hand. If your hand's not up, take it, just walk around. Has anyone ever noticed the big rainbow flag, similar to this one, but much bigger, outside on the front of the building, right out there? Might not always see that one because it's not where you're coming in, but there are plenty on your way in. We fly that to say something important. This congregation strives to make sure everyone knows that they belong here, that they will feel accepted here and loved, everyone, just as they are. And to hang the flag outside doesn't make that happen, but to hang the flag outside lets people know what they may be able to find inside. Helps to share that. It's bright, it's beautiful, it's meant to be a sign of welcome, a sign of pride, a sign of love. But sometimes, in some places, there are people for whom that flag is scary. Maybe because they don't understand. Sometimes it makes them angry because it feels like it doesn't include them and they might be losing something. There's maybe lots of reasons. We don't know what all those are. And sometimes they even steal it, maybe for any of those reasons, or maybe they love it so much that they wanted to hang on their front porch. We don't know, do we? So that happened to one church. They had a flag out, and they hung it up, and someone stole it. And it made them really mad. Some people. It made some people really sad. And they were talking about it. And they're like, we really cared for that. That was really important to us. It was a very important symbol. And it's been taken. What? I don't know. We're really working hard to make people feel safe, and now we don't. And maybe some of those people didn't feel safe either because that happened. And it feels like someone tried to take that love away. Of course, we know that's not possible, right? No one took the love away when they took the flag. And that kind of was sitting in there, and they were thinking about that because all the other reactions didn't feel quite right. So, Because first they said, well, let's hang the next flag up, but let's hang it up really high so no one can reach it, so high. Some people said, well, we should put up another one and we should put a trail cam out. And then we will see who takes the next one, and we will turn them in, and they will get punished. That seems like a good idea. And then no one will take a flag, because it will be clear if you take our flag, you will be turned in to the police. So, but none of those really felt right. So they kind of sat with hurt and anger and fear, thought about it, took a deep breath, and they remembered who they were. They're people of love. They remembered that. And someone said really excitedly, what if we did something different? What if we answered with love? So they made a new plan. They put up a new flag, right, where they could easily reach it and hang up another one and another one if it was necessary. And then they made a sign. Big sign right by their flag. It said, if you take this flag, then we are going to hang up another one, and we will make a donation to the LGBTQ Center so that they are able to put even more love out into the world. And that's what they did. They didn't have to get mean. They didn't have to fight back, and they didn't have to give up. They didn't have to be afraid to show what they cared about. They just stayed who they were. They were a community of love. They kept their boundary. They said, we don't choose harm. We choose love. They kept their freedom. We get to choose how we react. We're free to do that. And they kept their responsibility. They kept showing up for one another, for everyone. That's what healthy boundaries look like. Not a wall, a boundary wall, but a circle of love. It stays strong even when someone tries to take the flag. It's about knowing what is ours, what belongs to us, and what belongs to others, and it isn't ours. They can choose, They chose how to respond, and they chose to respond with love. Every time we choose love, that circle gets a little stronger, but not as a barrier. Every time we stay kind, every time we stay brave, even when it's really hard, our light shines. The light shines just a little more brightly. Thank you for sharing that with me today. And we will continue in courage and love in that spirit as we get ready to take our offering. Thank you. It's right here.
Today's offering goes to Riddall Green Partnership, an extraordinary training center for urban agriculture in a once desolate area of Cleveland's Kinsman neighborhood. Riddall, which was founded by childhood friends Damien Forche, Kama Durden, and Randy McShepard, works to educate the next generation of Clevelanders to learn to grow and eat fresh foods, and also to operate and grow their own businesses in the food industry, ranging from composting to selling fresh produce and fish, to food distributors, to full-fledged processing and packaging of fresh food products. Through their work with youth, veterans, and others, especially in the African American community, Riddall cultivates hope and healing in all that they do. As one staff member put it, we can remediate this soil. Can we remediate this community? Can we remediate lives? What can we do with a human life? Your contribution to Riddall's work makes a difference. please place your offering, cash or check, made payable to UUCC in the collection plate as it's passed. You can also contribute via Zelle or Cash App, and instructions on how to do that appear in your order of service. Please use the memo line to indicate today's date, October 26th, and our plate recipient, Riddle. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen groundswell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair when they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps, I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made, but at spring mending time we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go, to each the boulders that have fallen to each. And some are loaves, and some so nearly balls, we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling them. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game, one on a side. It comes to little more. There where it is, we do not need the wall. He is all pine, and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly, and I'd rather he say it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well, he says again, good fences make good neighbors.
I find myself wondering with Robert Frost, why do we need a wall if my apple trees are not going to leap over and eat your pine cones? And yet we've got these couple of words in our covenant that we read most weeks that says that one of the ways that we cultivate trust is by honoring boundaries. I wonder if we know what we mean by that when we say we honor boundaries. Does it mean that we mend the walls between us, or does it mean something else? What's an example of a boundary? Do you have one that comes immediately to mind? A door is a boundary, sure. Okay, so what would that boundary be? I don't want to be touched. Sure. It's tough, though, because sometimes, like, we might think of a no parking sign as a boundary. But I don't want to be touched or no parking. I mean, that's kind of a request. We can make a polite request or we can make a demand, but it's not really a boundary until we say, if I see a vehicle in this spot, I'm going to call the tow company. That's the boundary. If I'm touched, this is how I'm going to respond. That's the boundary. I don't know if that's a healthy boundary. I don't know if it's a good boundary. But what we will do, what we own, what we're responsible for, is where the boundary gets defined. Henry Cloud and John Townsend, I guess I should call them Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, wrote a book called Boundaries many, many years ago, and they talk about this triangle of healthy boundaries. The triangle of healthy boundaries includes freedom and responsibility and love. And since our theology centers liberating love, I thought it would be good to start at a place that says healthy boundaries are about freedom and love and responsibility. Freedom, because boundaries are liberating. They invite freedom, maybe unlike walls. But boundaries define what we allow and what we create. So we're free to live into a vision for our lives, our community, our world, because our boundaries help us define the freedom that we have and the freedom that we don't have. We aren't free to control other people's behavior. We aren't free to control other people's decisions, but we are free to say no to the things that are outside of what we allow and create. In relationships where we are free from one another, we are free to love one another, because love can only exist where there is freedom. And that freedom has to be mutual. We have to allow other people to be free. It's one thing to be able to say no, but it's another thing to be able to receive no from someone. So, healthy boundaries invite freedom and also responsibility. Boundaries help us determine who is responsible for what. In the simplest sense, a boundary is a property line. Each person takes responsibility for their own feelings, desires, attitudes, thoughts, behaviors, values, choices, talents, limits, love. Each person takes responsibility for their own feelings, desires, attitudes, thoughts, behaviors. And responsibility involves action. If we're responsible for putting the flag out that says what our values are, then that takes action. We have to do a thing. If something's going to happen, it's going to happen because we take responsibility for it happening. And understanding responsibility helps keep us from enabling harmful behaviors too. Taking appropriate responsibility allows us to avoid taking on a victim mentality. So boundaries help us to be responsible for our own freedom and our own empowerment, because where there is no responsibility, there is no freedom. When we don't take responsibility for our own issues, we stay stuck in current reality. So freedom and responsibility, the third leg of Cloud and Townsend's healthy boundaries triangle, is love. And by one definition, love is active commitment to another person's well-being. Love is also a choice. Without love, we often default to obligation and coercion. We can't truly love another person if we don't have a choice not to. And when we default to obligation and coercion, that doesn't necessarily feel safe. But love creates a sense of safety. Love respects the boundaries of others. There may be occasions when love doesn't feel safe, because emotional discomfort may be part of our boundary setting. But remember that being uncomfortable is not the same as being harmed. Love tells the truth, because love and authenticity have to coexist. When we aren't honest, we lose connection. And love is courageous. Therefore, we have the courage to engage in clear, direct, honest, and compassionate conversations. So love, respect, and freedom in action are the definition of healthy boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. And every time I talk about boundaries, I'm reminded of a story. I'm reminded of a lot of stories, and some of you have heard this story, but I'm going to tell it again anyway because it's the one that most clearly demonstrates the consequences in my life of not setting healthy boundaries. Because for several years, we hosted weekly games in our home on Sunday afternoons. We focused on cooperative board games, and there were a few of the games that the group really loved that were complicated and took hours to finish. It wasn't unusual for people to be in our home for 6 to 8 hours to finish a game. And when we first started out, we wanted to invite a larger group of people than just those that we personally knew, so I put up something online to reach out to a broader circle of players to build more diverse community. And still, most of the people who joined us already knew somebody in the group. People showed up with a common expectation about the shared responsibility of creating an environment where everyone enjoyed our time together. But one Sunday, we had someone arrive in response to the online posting, but they hadn't responded, they hadn't RSVP'd, so I didn't know to expect them. They arrived late, after we'd already started a rather complicated game. They were on their device almost the entire time. They didn't really interact with the other players at the table. It wasn't clear that they were paying attention to anything happening at the table, which is a bit of a problem for a cooperative game. This player went out to their car more than once. Every time it was almost their turn, it seemed like they were getting up from the table. They commented more than once on how nice our house was and asked what we did for a living. Just everything about the way that they engaged was unsettling and frustrating. And when the game was over, this new player left, and the people that we thought of as friends remained. And I apologized to the group because I realized I had not set appropriate boundaries for our gathering. I hadn't set the right boundaries for the experience that I wanted for myself and the other people there. With no boundaries about when people arrive and how they participate, everyone had a less rewarding experience. People were a bit on edge and guarded because the unpredictable behaviors of one player were out of sync with the group's goals of connection and play. A common understanding about arrival time and putting away devices and how we collectively participate in the group's activity would have created a greater sense of freedom and connection. It would have invited people into the experience that we wanted. Boundaries are loving. They define who is responsible for a space, and they invite a sense of freedom. And it's a hard lesson to learn when we want to be inclusive and welcoming. We don't need or want to set boundaries around who a person is. Every identity can be welcome in a space, and people can be their full, authentic selves and still operate within the boundaries of what a group chooses to allow and create. That's what a covenant is. A covenant is a way of saying these are the boundaries of our community. A covenantal community is just another way of saying a community with clear boundaries. And if they're healthy boundaries, then they'll involve love and responsibility and freedom. Boundaries define what we allow and create as individuals and as collectives. So if we're building a bridge from current reality to a vision of greater wholeness and well-being, the container for that journey is clear boundaries. They say, this is how we will move toward that vision. This is what we will do. This is what we will not do in order to move toward a greater sense of shalom for ourselves and the world around us. Another way of thinking about it is that boundaries allow us to say two things. The first one is, I'm safe enough to be here. Boundaries say, I'm not leaving. I'm not going to withdraw. Even emotional withdrawal is a form of manipulation. It's one of those things that we do when we get into that anxious autopilot defensive routine of distancing, is we emotionally withdraw. And I know I know a few people here have had dissatisfying experiences with things like reconciliation circles and reconciliation processes of one kind and another. And I think some of those processes become unsatisfying, not because they're bad processes, but because they originated in communities where leaving was not really on the table, where everyone knew this is a place of belonging. Everyone here is in this together. Nobody's going to run away. Nobody's going to be cast out. These relationships matter, and so we need to figure this out. We need to repair what exists between us because that matters. So this sense of healthy boundaries allowing us to define relationships in which we say, I'm safe here. safe enough to do difficult work is really challenging, but it's a prerequisite for doing any kind of reconciliation process. The process all by itself doesn't have much worth without the pre-existing relationship. The other thing that boundaries let us say, not just I am safe enough, but that I am separate. I get to be me. We talked about self-differentiation last week. I'm free to be an individual. I can make my own choices. If other people have the power to get you to react the way they want you to, they're living inside your boundaries. They're on your property. So boundaries let us say, I'm safe and I'm an individual. They help us differentiate ourselves, and they keep us from becoming fused with other people. We talked about this last Sunday. Interpersonal fusion happens when a person can't separate themselves emotionally from another person. So they take responsibility for how another person feels, or they make other people responsible for how they feel. Fused people blame a lot. They work hard to gain approval and please others, or they work hard to demand that other people adopt their feelings and their point of view. Clear, healthy boundaries lessen our sense of fusion. And we realize we can love another person without taking on their anxiety, without being responsible for their feelings. Boundaries hold us in authentic connection, and they protect us from a couple of things that we do when we're feeling anxious. A lot of times we go to one extreme of either complying or controlling. That's what a lot of us do when we're anxious. When we're not at our best, we usually gravitate toward, or we vacillate between one and the other. And one extreme is to comply. When we comply, we say yes to things that we don't really want to say yes to. We have a hard time saying no. We take on things that are too much responsibility for us. And I think a lot of times we comply because we're afraid. We're afraid of hurting someone's feelings, which is taking responsibility for other people's feelings. That's a boundary issue. We can choose to be kind and compassionate without taking responsibility for how another person feels. We can be responsible to one another for how we show up with integrity without being responsible for one another. Sometimes we comply because we fear other people's anger. If the church had just taken down the flag and said, oh, there's going to be consequences if we put up another flag, they would have been afraid of what somebody else would do and comply with this unspoken demand not to put a flag up. Maybe we fear abandonment or loneliness. We give in so the other person won't give up on us or leave us out. We keep choosing to keep the peace over living by our values. I guess some people comply because they fear being seen as unspiritual or selfish. They worry about looking good rather than having clear guiding principles. Or maybe we're afraid of feeling guilty. I'll feel guilty if I say no, and therefore I had better comply, because the fear of feeling guilty is more powerful. When we comply, we fail to define ourselves well. By the way, churches often unconsciously take advantage of this tendency of ours to comply, because if a complier can't say no, then they just keep taking on more things, and leaders keep asking them to do more things because they get things done, and compliers have no capacity to stop until they absolutely have to, because they're completely overwhelmed or burned out. Spiritual communities often develop a culture of expecting leaders to operate at maximum capacity all the time, which does not usually lead to our best decision making. It's a boundaries issue. But that second extreme, if our tendency isn't to comply, our tendency is often to control. When we go to this extreme, we don't respect other people's boundaries. We can't hear a no. When we comply, we can't say no. When we control, we can't hear no. When we're controlling, we demand that other people give in to our way of seeing things, to give in to our wishes. We take self from other people in order to feel safe ourselves. And feeling safe when we're in a controlling mindset means that other people do what we want them to do. When we operate from this extreme, we're limited in our ability to define ourselves. We blame something or someone else. It's always out there rather than working on the things within us. We use anger or guilt to get our way when we're in this mindset. And people who stay in this control extreme often have a hard time feeling loved. because they believe that the only reason someone will do something for them or with them is because of a demand that they've made. We might not even be aware that we're doing it. And tending toward compliance or control doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means we've gotten anxious. It's an indication that our boundaries could use some work. Boundaries help us take responsibility for our own lives, our own ideas, our own decisions. They help us define who we are. This is who I am. These are the values that I act from. This is what I will do. This is what I will not do. As a religious community, boundaries define who we are. This is what we're about. This is what we will do. This is what we will not do. So freedom, responsibility, and love help us know that our boundaries are healthy. They define what we allow and what we create. They establish that we're safe enough and can be our full, authentic selves. They keep us from the extremes of compliance and control. A boundary is a property line. Boundaries are about what's mine and therefore my responsibility. But based on what? Is it just the wall has always been there and so we're going to walk the line and put the stones back where they fell from? What are healthy boundaries based on? Well, this is why we have life-affirming values. As a faith tradition, we've decided that our boundaries are going to be built on certain values like generosity and pluralism, justice and equity, transformation and interdependence. These things establish a vision of what we want to create and what we allow. And we get to decide what that means in our personal lives. We get to say, we hold interdependence as a foundational value, and therefore, this is how that takes shape in my life. As a congregation, we get to say, we hold equity as a foundational value, and that calls us to do X, Y, or Z. But boundaries are also more about practice than about building walls that are firm and stay for all time. We might say yes to something today that we'd say no to tomorrow because we have a different capacity, or we understand things differently, or we've said yes to other things. We might be able to say no today to something that we aspire to say yes to in the future. Our boundaries do not have to be fixed and rigid, and we don't have to write them down and put them on the fridge and read them every day and make sure we're doing it. If we are sourcing our boundaries from our values, then we get to decide moment by moment what feels like the right percentage of love and freedom and responsibility. So our boundaries are a practice, calling ourselves back to center when we notice that we're anxiously complying or controlling, reflecting on what we want to create, rooted in our values, and moving forward in a way that has integrity and honors our connection to one another without taking responsibility for one another. That's all boundaries are. Just that. And that's what covenant is intended to be for us, both as a tradition in association with other Unitarian Universalist communities and our covenant here. It's a set of boundaries that help us define what we allow and create together, that invite freedom and responsibility and love as we journey together toward greater wholeness, a future that we create with one another, for one another, and for the world. May we be so bold. I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we raise our voices with hymn number 1020, Woyaya. It's in the Teal hymnal, 1020. I have a few things to let you know about. First one is that there's a ministry meet and greet. Sometimes we've called it a ministry fair downstairs today, so that you can see how all of the different pieces of our community operate. And if you're wanting to get involved in some things, you might feel a particular tug in one direction or another. The choir did a great example with that offertory. It's so rich with all of those harmonies, and it required every person knowing their part and being in harmony with all of the other parts. If one person was trying to sing all of those parts, I don't know where they would get trained to do that, but it seems like it would be impossible. And it's the same way with our congregation. No one can do all of the parts, but we live in harmony with one another. And so the ministry fair will let you see where your part might be if you haven't discovered that yet. And also, today is the first day that our Earth-Centered Spirituality group is going to be talking about organizing and planning for the future. That's going to be in the conference room, which is room 215, right on the other side of this hallway. The number for 215 is not back up after painting the door frame just yet, but if you walk in the room and you look up, it'll say room 215 on the inside, which is maybe less helpful. But if you are interested in being a part of that planning session for our Earth-Centered Spirituality group, after you breeze through the fellowship hall, meet folks over in room 215 to talk about the future for that group. Speaking of future things, I just wanted to let you know, I deeply appreciate the number of you that participated in focus groups about our capital campaign. We're in kind of a threshold period there as well. There will be more news coming out, but your participation helped us to define that our vision that we're aiming for with this capital campaign is about revising our building, tending to it in a meaningful way. We've talked about greater accessibility and welcoming of our entryway. We've talked about reorienting and freeing up our sanctuary for more flexible worship. We've talked about expanding the fellowship hall so that we can accommodate our fuller congregation for things. If you've been at a potluck, you know it gets a little bit crowded in there. And we've talked about tending to our entryway where there's some masonry that's crumbling and needs a little bit of attention to make sure that our building stays upright. And we've talked about doing all of these things. Oh, and HVAC systems in the fellowship hall and the sanctuary is part of the plan you've defined. And we've talked about all of these things with a thread of environmental sustainability. So that is the vision for really this part of our building to be revised and updated for our needs and so that we're tending it well. And you have helped to clarify that. That is going to be in a booklet that you get when the capital campaign gets more thoroughly underway. But I just wanted to update you on where things are because things are in motion, but a lot of it isn't visible right now because we're forming that steering committee and getting underway. So thank you for your participation in that. May we go forth from this place. Oh, I didn't say auction. I was supposed to say auction. I was going to get an angry email. Auction is on Saturday, November 1st. It's going to be an exciting time for our entire community to come together and be in not only community on that evening, but also in community with some of the events that are going to be auctioned that evening. So I hope you will come on November 1st and be a part of our special auction event. Whew, glad I remembered that. And now, may we go forth with freedom and responsibility and love in our relationships here and everywhere. May we look to our values to guide what we allow and what we create in our lives and in the world around us, so that we might journey together toward greater wholeness and well-being. Go with peace and courage. Amen.
Please join me in extinguishing the chalice with the words found on the back of the yellow card in the pew rack in front of you. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.